Welcome back to the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This episode, we welcome Ram V to the podcast to talk his latest comic, Dawnrunner, over at Dark Horse Comics. We also talked a bunch of other things, including some of his other titles that are out there right now, Rare Flavours, Detective Comics, The One Hand, Six Fingers, all that stuff is so much more right here on the podcast. But before you listen to Ram V and I chat, make sure you head over to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky and follow us, like us, do all that stuff over there, and subscribe, rate, review, all that stuff over on Apple, Spotify, and all your major podcasting platforms. Also, check us out on YouTube and at capesandtights.com. This is episode with Ram V, comic book writer of things like Venom, Detective Comics, Carnage, The Rare Flavors, and upcoming Dawnrunner at Dark Horse Comics. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, Ram. How are you today?
Yeah, very good. Just done with my work for the day, kind of settling into my evening routine. So nice to be chatting with you.
It's great to hear that too, because time difference here. I'm on the East Coast in Maine, in the United States, and you're over in the UK, correct? Am I right about that?
Yeah, I'm in London. I used to live on the East Coast a while back. I used to live in Philly, and I lived in New York for a couple of years as well. Yeah.
But so you're at the end of your day. I'm in the middle of my day, but whatever.
Yeah.
You can rub it in. You're in the future, actually, isn't that the case? You're in the future.
I think so. Yeah, who knows? Time is a circle anyway.
Yes, exactly right. But yeah, so I mean, obviously you've been writing comics and doing this for a little while now. But I mean, I'm guessing most of our listeners know who Ram V is. But have you been a comic book fan your entire life, or was this something later in your life? What's your comic book origin story in a sense?
I was a comic book reader when I started off. As a very young kid, I read a lot of the European sort of Phantom, Mandrake, Flash Gordon stuff, not a lot of the Marvel DC stuff. And I read a lot of Indian comics, a lot of European comics, Tintin and Asterix. And so, yeah, they were part of my childhood, but I was nowhere near as intense as, I never owned a costume or anything of that sort. And then I stopped reading them for the longest time. My father took away all my comics and went, like, you have to start reading proper books now, and then gave me like a copy of Steinbeck, and I was depressed for most of my teenage years. And then somewhere around 1920, I moved to the States, and a friend of mine gave me volume 1 of Sandman. And that kind of rekindled my love and interest in comics. But that was, I think, the first time I ever thought of like, I would love to write something like this one day. I'd been writing since I was a kid. I'd been writing since I was about 12 or 13. I just never put the two things together until about 2013, 2014, when I was a friend of mine. I was already writing at the time. I'd written a few prose stories that had been published, and a friend of mine said, you have a very visually evocative writing style. Have you ever tried writing comics? And my brain just went, yeah, why haven't I tried writing comics?
And here we are, right?
Yeah.
It's funny how I was talking to someone at my local comic book shop here in town, and I was laughing because I mentioned the idea. I was like, wait, Ram's only been like writing comic books professionally for like 10 years. And they're like, wait, why? Because it was like, it seems like, it seems like you've been doing this for like, just the name, you're attached to so many prolific comic book titles with, Detective Comics and Carnage and Venom. Those books, people were like, oh, he must be a seasoned veteran. And I'm like, it's actually in the
no,
scheme of things, you're not.
My first sort of internationally published comic was self-published, was Black Mamba in 2016. And then my first widely published comic was probably Paradiso from Image in 2017. My first DC work was only in 2019. So it's not been very long at all, but it's been, it's one of those things when you write for yourself, you write as a hobby. There's something, I mean, a combination of imposter syndrome and the Dunning-Kruger, or at least awareness of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You're kind of looking at your own work and go, and one part of you is going, God, that's amazing. Like you're brilliant. The other part of you is going like, wait, what if I'm the only one who thinks that? And so it was really lovely those first few years to put work out and then have people react really strongly to it, really viscerally to it. Yeah, and then I'm at a point now where I'm like, cool, I still crave that, and now people have this expectation. Like I think a couple of months ago, someone sent me a bunch of reviews of my own comics on a website called like League of Comic Geeks, I think it's called. And I've got a couple of friends who are members there, so they keep sending me like funny comments and shit from that website.
Yeah.
And someone had commented, "Oh, another Ram V book. At this point, it would be a surprise if it was bad." Uh, and I was like, "Well, that's not the sentiment you want, which is like this, oh, another good book. God damn it."
Yes, exactly.
But I suppose it's nice to have set that expectation now. So um also on some level, I'm like, cool, I want to make something that makes even those people stand up, people who expect the work to be good, you know?
Now I feel like you just need to have like a goal of like making a really shitty comic book just to be like, see, I
No, no,
can do
no.
it.
See, never do that. Go the other way. Make like a really amazing comic book.
Well, I love it. Your solicit for Dawnrunner, it says rising star Rom V. And I'm like, well, in a lot of our books, a lot of us who are fans of your work were like, I
Yeah.
think you're already there. I don't know if you're rising.
No, I think this was a remnant of the standard format that Dark Horse has. Because it was funny, we saw both Evan and I saw this, and Evan's been amazing in
Yeah.
animation and graphics for a really long time as well. And we went to Dark Horse and said, well, like I'd like to kind of stop rising now, and just I'm happy at just to be a star where I am. I don't need to
Yes.
rise anymore. Um,
It's funny because I read it because I'm like, and that's another reason why I think some people like if otherwise, and I think your biggest thing is it's not just the quality of but the books you've been attached to, like not just everybody gets to write Detective Comics or Venom or these books are like a
yeah.
Catwoman. Like these books are books that people covet to write, and so to have your name so I say so quickly on a
Mm.
name like Detective Comics, I think some people again will think, oh, Rom's been doing this for generations now. Like like it's he's been doing this for a while, and it's like, well, no, if you actually look at his resume, it's not that long, and it is. I mean, do you feel lucky that you've been able to get on a book like the Detective Comics and things like that so quickly? I mean, some people wait years and years and years.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of a couple of things. I don't think you can undermine or undervalue the role of luck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Anyone who's made it to any level of success in their career, you can always find 10 others with same amount of talent, same amount of hard work who didn't make it there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, there's always serendipity and luck, but the analytical mind in me says it applies equally to everyone. So it's not really something you control, so you don't worry about it. On the other side, I think it's also because I've been very true to my own voice. Like to me, the worst place for me to end up would be to sound like someone who's been doing this for 30 years and
Mm-hmm.
doesn't care. To sound like, oh yeah, who's it's another comic, who cares who the writer is, or like the voice is so generic that it could be somebody else who wrote some other comic, you know. um I think that's poor writing, and I've expressed this view to others before, where there's this view that, oh, you write commercial art, so you just kind of do your thing and then walk away. And I'm like, it doesn't matter, it's still art. Even
Mm-hmm.
if it's commercial, it's still art, and so it has to be about you in some way, it has to be evocative in some
Mm-hmm.
way. And if you look at truly interesting artists, even on the commercial sphere, they're all people who have a voice. Now, uh, I love David Fincher, and you can look at a David Fincher film and go like, that's a David Fincher film. You don't
Mm-hmm.
need to hear the dialogue. You don't need to see the entire hour and a half, 2 frames, and you're like, that's David Fincher. On the same side, like I'm not a huge fan of Michael Bay, and
Mm-hmm.
Mike, but I know he's like a hugely successful director as well. But the one commonality is you can look at 2 frames of a Michael Bay film and go like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's a Michael Bay film. Um, and so having that sort of voice, having that thing that is you is very important. And I feel like part of the reason I've been lucky enough to end up on these books is also because I bring that voice, I bring that sort of unique point of view to these books.
Do you think that's not say easier, but it becomes easier to you with the ability to do some creative or own stuff at the same time of doing some of these intellectual properties or like big two books, like having the ability to do like play with whatever you want to play with, but then go into more of a structure that you have to have at least some rules in what you do?
I mean, yes and no.
Okay.
Like I feel like I'm ill-equipped to answer that question because I've always done creator-owned books
Yes.
at all points in time. 2 years before I did anything for DC, I was already putting out creator-owned books. So the reason I was working at DC is because I was putting out creator-owned books. And then
Yeah.
recently, when I signed an exclusive with DC, I said to them, "Listen, like I'm happy to exclusively work for DC as long as I on the creator owned front, I get to do what I want."
Mhm.
And I remember in that discussion saying like it's like breathing air. If you ask me not to do creator owned books, it's like asking me not to breathe.
Mhm.
And so I don't think there will ever be a time where I'm not doing something that just exists because it tickles me in some way. I don't do the creator owned stuff for the big sales or the huge successes or anything. They're just books that my brain's like, oh man, it would be awesome if I wrote this. Yeah.
And you have a variety of books too, and which is cool. And you've been able to work with a variety of artists and creators and letterers and colorists and things.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned earlier, they all have a Rom V stamp on it. Like not literally, I mean they literally do. They have your name on it, but like
Yeah.
they like you read it, you're like, this is your book. You can tell this is your
Yeah.
book,
Yeah.
even though it's maybe a different, potentially different genre. Or I
Yeah.
mean, you work with some very different artists too. It's just
Yeah.
not like that
Yeah.
you don't look at a book and go, oh, those looks like a Rom book. You like you have to kind of read it and get into it. But like you work with an artist, that's pretty cool. And having that ability to stretch it out and do all these different things. I mean, I was just looking at, you have like what Rare Flavors out right now.
Hmm.
The One Hand, you're
Yeah.
doing Detective Comics. You got Dawnrunner coming, so you're not like it's not like you're not busy. You're doing a,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're pretty busy. Did I hit everything that's out right now? Rare Flavors, the One Hand, Detective Comics, and Dawnrunner coming right now. Is that where you're
Yes.
at right now?
Yes. Yes. That's right.
Okay. I was like, it's like, and you got multiple of them are creator owned, and they all have different style
Completely. Yeah.
artistically.
Completely different styles, completely different genres. I think Rare Flavors is weird, super magic realist food documentary. The One Hand and the Six Fingers are a cat and mouse murder
Yep.
mystery, but told in two different books by two different writers. And then Dawnrunner is mecha kaiju, um, big bombast storytelling, but intimate ghost
Mhm.
story, body horror, sci-fi romance.
It's speaking of Dawn Runner, that's what we really. I mean, I asked, we reached out to Dark Horse to talk to you
Yeah.
about Dawn Runner because that's coming out here pretty soon.
Yeah,
And
March
if you don't
20th,
mind,
I believe.
March
Yeah.
20th, yeah. So that's it's right around the corner. With that a 5 issue miniseries coming out from Dark Horse, and when I reached out to Caitlin, I was like, yeah, when I get these emails back, and then Caitlin passed me on to whoever
Mhm.
helps me get to you. It was the I get these emails saying new book from Dark Horse, and anything from Dark Horse, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read what this solicit is. I'm gonna read what this book is
Sure.
because Dark Horse puts up some bangers. But like then you see your name attached to it, and I was like, okay, let me really look at this thing going on there. And so I got to read it, and it was fantastic. And
Thank you.
I just can't wait. And the other downside of reading a book before it comes out is you have to wait even longer for the
For the
for
second
the
issue, yeah,
yes
yeah.
exactly. So I think that it's when I go to read it, I was like, okay, I want to read this because it's your story. And again, I had this ability. Evan's artwork is fantastic in it. I will say, I looked at just before we started recording here. I was looking at the cover, to cover A, and I was looking at the lines,
Yeah,
that are on. Like, there's like so many lines of texture on
yeah.
the cover. I'm like, I can't imagine trying to draw that. It
It's
seems so
weird. Like
tedious.
he is surprisingly fast for someone who does such deliberate work.
Hmm.
Um, I'm convinced either he's got some kind of preternatural ability, or he's just like running himself into the ground and then pretending to be fine when he wakes up the next day. So yeah.
It was just kind of funny. I'm like, typically, I'm a graphic artist by day. I do mostly cans for beer art or beer art for cans,
Uh-huh.
and so I do a lot of my stuff digitally and stuff. And I do some illustrations, but I was just thinking about it, I'm like trying to draw those lines over and over again, and like in even in sequential parts of it. Like there's parts in this book where there's like
Yeah.
your monster or your kaiju monster. All those things are all on multiple panels, and I'm just thinking to myself like, it's just setting yourself up to be like, oh crap, I got to do it again. But I'm sure Evan loves doing it, so it's not like
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing to note is also like some of these are not on paper. They're
yes.
on like scratch board. So he's used like a blade or a knife to scratch out the black parts. And I'm just like, insane. That is insane to me. But
Makes you happy you're a writer, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's clearly, but also, I've seen people struggle with like, how do you know what words to put down?
Yes. But and like it's that's why one of the things that we love comic books so much. I think it's because there is this multifaceted thing to it. There's down to the lettering, the coloring, the different covers there are, that the stories, the writing, all this stuff. There's multiple facets. I think I was talking to you, mentioned about reading, actually telling your dad telling you to read actual novels, and my parents were just happy I was freaking reading. They're like, you can actually read, cool. Let's put a comic books in front of you and see what happens.
Yeah,
And I've read a lot more novels as an adult than I did when I was younger. And
sure.
if you don't like someone's writing style or what the story is about, you basically just close the novel up and move on, because it's just, there's nothing else to it. I could hate
Sure.
your writing and still enjoy a comic book if the artwork is good. I could hate, the opposite. You could read the story and then go, okay, this artwork's not
Mm,
what I want, but I can
mm,
still read it, and so on and so forth.
mm.
So, might not like the plot that much, but the scripting is really good or whatever. There's so many
Yeah,
different.
look, I mean, I compare it very much to making music in a band, right? It's very like, in my opinion, Trent Reznor could not sing to save his life, but compositionally, his
Yeah.
instrumental setups, his sense of music, his sense of pushing sound is so phenomenal that I love Nine Inch Nails. But I
Yes.
think there are plenty of better singers on the planet. And I think like reading a comic is very much that sort of experience. I don't think you should be looking at, I mean, I don't think most readers go like, I like the art, but I'm not sure about the writing. I think most readers are just going to look at it and go, I love the story.
Mhm.
I may have felt strongly about the art, not so much about the writing, or vice versa. But in the end, your hope is that no one's able to tell where one thing ends and the other begins. So in the end, you're delivering a song
Mhm.
to someone who's listening.
And that's we had this discussion. I have a book club at my local comic book shop where we read a trade paperback every month, and we
Yeah.
discuss it and so on. And when you go into, we talk about the art, we talk about the, so on and so forth. And sometimes the people complain. They know me. They put me into a whole, like a position of not too many words on a page. Like there's certain writers who have splash pages of text, and then there's all these bubbles that cover up most of the art and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. And in those times, I think that people are trying to write too much of the story, if that makes like script too much of the story, and not let the art speak for itself sometimes. And so like you're with Dawnrunner, I think it was great because you and Evan worked so well together. There was like,
Mm,
you could say things, but then I could interpret my own things on the page. Like I could take
yeah.
that artwork and go, oh, I know what Rom's trying to say, like those kind of things. And I think that's why you work so
Yeah.
well with your artists, in my opinion. And that's
Yeah, I mean,
it makes it seem effortlessly.
yeah, I mean, look, I think stuff like too many words on a page, unless you're doing something egregious, like your artwork is covered by the text,
Mhm.
I actually feel like those kinds of rules are overly simplified, and they exist to maybe like explain on a very superficial level
Mhm.
how to write a good comic. But there are no rules, man. They're all tools, right? Like
Mhm.
words are a tool, the art is a tool, how many panels on a page is a tool. And really, when you're making a comic, it's about learning how to use these tools. So there might be a page where you've got, 30 words in every panel, and then followed by a page that's just one panel with no words on them. And it's about learning how to use any of and all of those things. Like, it would be so ridiculous to take a rule like that and put it in any other medium. It's only in comics that people talk
Yes.
about it this way, Like, you wouldn't ever go to a filmmaker and be like, "Oh, you got too many characters in this shot. You should
Yeah.
only have six. You got seven characters in this shot. No, 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 that doesn't work."
That's too
Yeah, yeah, nobody does that. And I feel like we tend to simplify comics too much because we want to give people these mathematical formulas of how to write a good story, but
much.
you can do all the calculations you want. A good story is going to be a good story, whether it has 100 more words in it or 50 less.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And speaking in partnerships like this, like how did you connect with Evan on this thing? What had this how this co-creation happen?
Yeah, it was really funny. I had reached out, sorry, I had seen Evan's artwork when he had done a print called Golgotha, which I think was very Evangelion inspired. So this huge mech, little character standing in front of it. And I had thought to myself, like, oh man, if I ever do that Mecha Kaiju story, this is the guy I want to reach out to. This is the guy I would ask to work with me. I went on his website, and he had already done some comic book work as well. So I was like, I'm really excited. Like this guy is going to be amazing. I'll reach out to him at some point because I was already busy working on other things. And then separately, a few weeks on, like I get an email from Evan out of nowhere. I think it was a DM, not an email. And he DMs me and he goes like, "Hey, you don't know me, but I read Grafiti's Wall, which is a book I did with Anand
Mm.
Radhakrishnan." And he's like, "I can't find too many other people who read it, but I think this is amazing and I love it. And it's so evocative. It made me feel things. Like I love comics, and I would love to, maybe collaborate with you at some point." And I was like, man, what are the chances? The exact same guy who I was like, I want to work with him, writes to me a few weeks after. So it was funny like that. But yeah, I got back to him. We broached the topic with Dark Horse, and lo and behold, we had a story.
And as much as we don't like social media out there right now, it's so funny. We're thinking back on how many comics probably wouldn't be made if it wasn't for like DMs and like the
Yeah.
ability to just get a hold of someone. The
Yeah.
creators, the people getting the chance to like talk to each other via like Twitter DMs or Instagram DMs is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I think comics on the whole is very much like that.
Yeah.
I think people underestimate the value of how beautiful it is that comics is such a flat structure that,
Mhm.
if I could randomly DM J.H. Williams and be like, "Oh my God, I'm a huge fan of your work." And J.H. Williams DMs me back. I was like, "Oh, I've read some of your stuff too, and it's great." I'm losing my mind here, but I'm trying to be calm on the DMs, but because I love his work. And I don't think there are a lot of other creative industries where that kind of flat structure
Mhm.
exists.
Yeah, and then you get these partnerships and relationships that last forever too. It's like one of those things that like you and Evan are going to be friends for a while now. You probably do projects in the future together just because
Yeah, yeah.
this one ability to have this, and Evan taking the
That's
risk of just
Sean
be like,
Phillips and Ed Brubaker,
yeah,
those
yeah,
guys.
like you comparing you guys, you and Evan to Sean Baker and
No,
Brubaker.
no, I'm
Okay,
I'm I'm talking about
I know.
long-lasting,
Lots of
wonderful
relationships.
relationships in comics. Yeah,
Yes, yes, exactly. And that's, I mean, and they did happen. Obviously, they happened pre social media and the internet, but not.
yeah,
I think the number of people and creators I've talked to where it's like, oh yeah, we just DM'd each other, and that's how we like. I was like, oh, and also working at different places at different times. Like you're
yeah,
sending emails and messages to each other. Like he's sending you illustrations to you. You're looking at them, and so on and so forth. That the internet
yeah.
and
And it's
social
such
media
a
has
it's
helped.
such an intensive process as well, right? Like especially
Yeah.
when you collab. Like I don't collaborate in a way where it's like a conveyor belt, or I write a script and then somebody else draws it and I don't talk to them. Like I tend to collaborate very much like, okay, let's sit down for a couple of hours and talk about these pages and let's make some choices one way or the other. And I think when you collaborate like that, like you have to be friends. You
Hmm.
have to be able, because I have to be able to give unvarnished opinion on stuff. Like if I don't like something, I have to be able to say it.
Hmm.
And at the same point, like if the artist wants to come back to me and say, actually, I think I'm gonna need a couple more pages here, or I think like this moment in your story, it doesn't really land because you haven't thought it through. They have to be able to say that. And I think that takes an extraordinary level of trust and friendship
Hmm.
when it comes to creative fields. Yeah.
Speaking of that, I mean the designs of like your was it Tetsa? Is that what you're calling them?
Mm-hmm.
The and then the Iron Kings, like those designs are so cool. Is that something that you and Evan worked together, or did you give him notes and he went with it, or how did that those come about?
I mean, I think conceptually, outside of me going, this is how I feel the mech should be. So telling him things like, okay, so Dawnrunner should feel like is a prototype mech, so it
Yeah,
should feel
yeah,
new compared to everything else, and it should feel sleek, and it's probably one of the quicker mechs, so less bulky, more
yeah.
agile. So outside of conceptual notes like that, I wouldn't dream of giving Evan any specifics until
This is
he
how I
had
watch.
like a yeah,
This
yeah,
is
exactly.
exactly how it should go.
What's the point in me telling him like the legs need to be like this, blah blah blah.
They're
So
2 inches too long. You got to shorten those legs. They're 2 inches too long.
yeah, see, so when he has a fresh draft, I'll go in and say stuff like
Yeah.
that. I'll go in and
Yeah.
be like, maybe the head's too big, or like, I feel like the head needs like I don't know, more aerodynamic shape, blah blah blah. So, but even that is a conversational process. But I would say like 80-90% of the work on those is Evan.
Mhm.
Um, the Tetsa slightly different. So the Tetsa actually their name comes from an Aztec word for sort of demigod creatures, like
Mhm.
ancient monsters, if you will. And I knew I know what they are, and I don't think most readers know what they are yet. And I don't think you'll truly understand what they are until you get to issue 4 or 5. Um, and so because I know the sort of behind the veil, I've seen behind the veil. Um, there are some choices that we made on the Tetsas and will continue to make on the Tetsas. Like you'll see as the story progresses, you'll see more of them, and you'll see that wait, that's not what I expected. That's not how I expected the second or third one to look. Um, yeah, so those designs are much more fluid,
Mhm.
and we had a few conversations in terms of what they would feel like, what they would be.
That's awesome. I love the collaborative part of it, and the best comics are the ones like you mentioned that work together so closely and do
Yeah,
things like this and bounce off ideas off of each other. There's a lot of like towards the end of this issue, like obviously it wouldn't be a kaiju style mech style comic book if there wasn't epic battles and things like that. Are we going to see a lot more of those as the issues progress, or is this like
yeah,
what's
yeah.
the
I think I think pretty much every issue has a few of those. Um, and then as we get to issue 4 and 5, I think those become much more dramatic.
Mhm.
And we kind of discover the truth behind what these creatures are. And yeah, epic things happen to Dawnrunner as well, and happen to the characters as well. And I think the challenge of this book is to balance those sort of epic notes with the softer, more intimate character moments, which, hopefully, given the twist at the end of the issue, you kind of starting to see where those are going to come from as well.
Mhm. It's funny too because we talked about Michael Bay already. Like Michael Bay movie is explosions and things like that, but they may not have as much heart as some of them have in it, and so on and so forth. Like it's balancing that out. Like obviously, we want to see we all of us want to see fights and battles with these things.
Yeah.
It's the same thing when you go down to a Godzilla movie. It's like obviously there's going to be these big epic battles with Godzilla, but like some of them are just that or
Yeah.
none of
Yeah.
that. And it was like the balancing between the two. Like you can't have these big
No,
giant.
yeah. I mean, when I
Like
when I pitched this to Dark Horse, I think one of the first things I said was like, I want to combine sort of the big bombast of Pacific Rim,
yep.
but also with like the drama focused human sci-fi of something like Arrival.
Mhm.
So when I mentioned those two things, Pacific Rim and Arrival put together, I think people really went like, oh, there's something cool and interesting there. So I think that's very much the aesthetic that we're going for. Is there will be big bombast and all of that, but then there will be intelligent, thoughtful, introspective sci-fi happening as well. Um, yeah, basically, I'm saying is don't worry. There are scenes where mechs get their arms ripped
It's
off and their bodies thrown as well, so it's great. Don't worry.
that's awesome. But you gotta have heart to it too. So that it's one of those things that you can't just have fun. So I'm glad that
Yeah,
there's gonna be a little bit of a mixture of everything in it. And that's like your writing style has that. You're able
yeah,
to draw from different, I'd say draw, but like pull from different
yeah,
things. And I'm glad you said Arrival and Pacific Rim, but also I'm glad it also wasn't like in the initial synopsis or the solicit
yeah,
because sometimes people just dumb it down to those things. But the rival thing I didn't think of until you said something. Pacific Rim, obviously, I pulled from when I was thinking about it. But yeah,
yeah,
that's a good comparison. I think people will like it. I absolutely loved it. It's hard to say early on in the year when you talk about a comic book and there's so much more to come out where
yeah,
things figure out with comics of the year and all that stuff. But I'm like, dude, you're in contention. This is one of those great comics that, and I talked about it at my book club, as we met on last Tuesday, saying I just read this
hmm
book and I'm really excited for people to read it and so on. And And I said it's easy to read, and it sounded so bad because it sounds so like I don't know. It was effortlessly to read, if that makes any sense. Not easy to read. It was
Yeah, like I
effortlessly
said, like you should, for all practical purposes, you should only hear the song, and every
yeah,
song is easy to hear. It's not like you have to make an effort to
yeah.
listen to music, and that's how every comic should feel.
Mhm.
And frankly, like regardless of how complex the story or like how convoluted my plot is, the one thing I really love is when people go like, oh, I got sucked into it. I didn't
Mhm.
realize I'd read so much of it until it was done. And I was like, whoa, I finished that really quickly. And then they'll go on to say, like, but it lingered with me for a week
Mhm.
after I couldn't stop thinking. And that's the great bit. Like, so it was complex and nuanced and powerful enough to evoke a response that lingers for a week. But when you're reading it, you should not be seeing the gears or seeing how the thing works or feeling things are out of place or having to engage and do work in a way that feels like work.
Mhm. Well, and I mentioned, I think I said I've read comic books before. Like someone used terminology that was so above my head that I was like, I had to Google it. I'm like, I shouldn't have to like pull my phone
Yeah,
out to look
yeah,
something up to be like, what
yeah,
is this thing that he's talking about? And I've also done it because a lot of the books I end up having to read digitally because obviously I get the advanced PDFs and
yeah,
I go to click on the screen to see how far in the comic book I am. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm only 30% through. This
yeah,
one was more along the lines where I clicked to go to the next page and it wanted me to go to the next comic. And I was like,
yeah,
wait, hold on a second. This is over already. And that's
yeah.
what I think is at the effortlessly part of it. And I think that's just exactly what you're
Even
explaining.
and to give your listeners context as well, this is a 32-page first issue.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And that's another big thing is the fact that like you crammed a lot into a lot of
yeah,
pages, but
yeah,
also like I said, I didn't feel that way, and it also makes it easier for me because I really like the idea of potentially going back on April 24th when issue 2 comes out, is to
yeah,
go back on the 23rd night and read the issue 1 again, so I get that back
yeah,
into it and then go into issue 2, and if it's effortlessly read, then I can
yeah.
easily do that. There's certain ones where I I was laughing because I do that a lot, and what was the one I was with the Last Ronin, because the Last Ronin came out so far apart from each other. I feel like I read
Oh
issue
yeah.
1 like a dozen times by the time we got to the end of it. 'Cause I'm like, I gotta remember what this is about. But having a monthly comic book is a little easier. So March 20th is when issue 1 comes out, issue
Yep,
2, 24th of April, and so on and so forth. You actually got 2 comics coming out on the 24th of April because the 5th issue of Rare Flavors comes out on the 24th of April.
yep, that's right.
Well, and then you had One Hand come out on February 7th and issue 2 coming out on the 13th.
Yep.
And as you said, this was
Six
six.
fingers as well.
Yeah.
So every Six Fingers issue comes out 2 weeks after the corresponding One
Okay.
Hand issue as well.
That's
So
cool. That's really cool.
One Hand One came out 2 weeks later. Six Fingers One. One Hand Two comes out, then 2 weeks later you get Six Fingers Two.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah,
That's so
yeah.
much fun.
I'm really happy to see. So both One Hand One and Six Fingers One went to second printings as well. They sold out. So really, really cool to see people pick up on what we're trying to do with the two
Mhm.
books. Because we didn't really shout out about it before the books came out because we wanted to for people to have the sense of discovery of like, oh,
Yeah.
holy shit, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, it's
Um,
fun. It's because the covers have a similar but different
yeah,
look to
yeah.
them. So like when you're looking at it, I'm like, because I even was like, I saw the issue come out. I was like, wait, hold on a second. Is this connected in a way? Like, what's going on here? And I was even like that. I'm like, there's no way these are not because
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
they
exactly.
definitely look like the same issue comic
Also,
book in
like
a sense
the
that
titles
yes,
insinuate they should be
yes,
connected, right? So yeah, I just love doing stuff like that. Like when I said earlier, like I don't do my creator owned things because like I want the big blockbuster hit every
yeah,
time. Um I do them because I'm fascinated by the idea of telling stories in a way that maybe people haven't thought of telling. Like I don't know another book that has done this where you haven't expressly told the readers like this is how you're supposed to do it.
mm,
Instead, you're kind of expecting them to find out, to them to piece the clues together.
yeah.
And then you think about how, to me, how cool that is that you're asking the readers to be detectives in a detective story, you
Mm.
know? Yeah.
And it's awesome. And if people missed out on it in the long run, it's great in the comic book industry getting the trades to come out afterwards, and you have the ability to do
Exactly.
them on that
Yeah,
sense
and
as
we're
well too.
collecting the trades that way as well. We're gonna have issue one, issue one, issue two, issue two.
Oh, see, there you go.
Yeah,
See,
yeah.
Rom, you just you're a rising star over there. I don't know.
I rise anymore. My head's going to be through the roof.
Exactly. And then you also Detective Comics still too. March 26th is the next issue of Detective Comics. But really, Dawnrunner is one I try. The funny thing is the benefit of doing an independent podcast about comic books is that I only have to bring on the people that I like their work. You know, like no one above me has been like, you really got to talk to Rom. He's got a comic book coming out, and I'm like, really? This is like I get to choose who I got to talk to, and I liked Dawnrunner so much. I was like, I gotta get on and get Rom on here and talk about the comics. So 5-issue miniseries coming out starting on March 20th from Dark Horse Comics. It's epic. It's fun. It's a bunch of different things all in one. I mean, again, you mentioned Arrival meets Pacific Rim in a sense. Just check it out for sure. But
thank you. I appreciate all the kind words. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm so excited for people to read it. It's one of those, obviously I don't have the same feeling when people read your work as you do. But I'm saying, like, when I read something that I really enjoy, it's really nice to hear someone else read it and be like, how'd you like it? I can't wait to actually, like, now that I'm read it like 3 weeks, I'm like, now, like, waiting for the 20th. I'm like, gonna go to my local comic book shop and be like, oh, you bought that? Read it right now and talk to me about it. Do not leave the shop.
You're just standing there at the counter, tapping your foot, going like, come on,
get through it. No, it's awesome. I'm excited for it. And then I like the first issue so much too. I was like, okay, I'm already recommending that we do the trade when the trade comes out for our book club, because I just wanted them all to read that. And it's different. Like I said, that's another thing. It's like I read a wide variety. Most of it's been horror lately in the super.
I mean, I can tell. I'm looking at all the issues behind you.
So it's been fun, and so to be able to read something a little bit different than everything else that I've read, that adds to it as well. And anytime I can support Dark Horse too, I love Dark Horse. So
excellent. Awesome. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, so I'm really excited for people to read it. So Dawnrunner, March 20th from Dark Horse Comics. Pick up anything that has your name on it, honestly, if anybody wants to read anything, because I highly recommend it. Big Marvel fan over here, so your Venom run, Carnage run, great stuff. So check those out, people. But yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time out to come out here and talk comics and all that stuff. We made it through without my daughter being born, so that's good.
Well, but congratulations in advance. Yeah.
We did it. We did. I recorded with a buddy at my local comic book shop.
That's right.
Came on
that's
earlier.
Right. We did all the hard work. Yes,
we did all the hard work. Well, I was joking. That was my wife. I was thinking about it. I was like, I slept in the living. My son isn't sleeping right now, and which is great. Perfect timing for my son to not sleep when I'm about to not sleep on a schedule. And so I was sleeping in the living room. He was sleeping on the couch. I slept on the air mattress in the living room to make him feel good, and so on and so forth. And I was like, oh, so difficult. Look at face, and she's just like, shut up. I'm like, I can't say anything's difficult right now.
Maybe I don't get to complain for a little bit.
I'm like, no, my wife is way stronger than I am. I'm gonna say it right now on the record. Women in general are way stronger than I will ever be. After I've seen my wife go through 2 pregnancies, it's definitely one of those things that there's a reason why men aren't the one getting pregnant.
You got to be tough. Yeah, you got to be tough.
No way. But I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk to us and so on and so forth. So everybody should pick up anything by Ron V. But Dawnrunner, March 20th, pick it up, people. Grab it. It's well worth it. So,
thanks so much.
Thanks, Ron, again. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And keep making great comics.
Cheers, Justin. Thank you so much. Take care.